Okay, so what we've got here is beer sales in New Zealand. In this section here, you can actually change to 3 different graphs. I'm going to start here, then show you the composition graph, and then I'll point out there's a forecast graph as well. Now, what we've got here is if you can see it from where you're seated, there are the different years that the data range comes from. So the computer has cropped, I think this might be a range of from 2008 to 2016, so a range of 9 years. So there's 9 different graphs, if I counted them, all cropped on top of each other in this picture here, each representing a different year between 2008 and 2016. What this graph here is an average of the 9 different years. Okay, notice the scale on this axis is just your raw data scale, whereas the scale on this axis is not. What this tells me, or the datum line is here, and another word for this line here is actually the trend line. The datum or the trend. And what this means, negative 0.1, it means that in the first quarter, we are 0.1 million litres below the trend. Every first quarter of every year, on average, we're 0.1 million litres below the trend line. Quarter 2, we're 0.3 million litres below the trend. Quarter 3, we're 0.4, and quarter 4, we're actually 0.8 million litres above the trend. Can you remember those 3 numbers? 0.1, 0.3, so 1348. 1348. Now, if you can see where my mouse is here, that's actually 0.1, that's 0.3, that's 0.4, and that's 0.8. If you looked at that scale there. 0.1, sorry, start here. Negative 0.1, negative 0.3, negative 0.4, positive 0.8. Right? And it repeats itself perfectly as that previous graph I showed you. So that's what that graph is in the middle, seasonal component. Above that, we've got a few things happening. The black is the raw, it's this data here. The blue is your MM, like we've been practicing on Excel. So that's taken out any seasonality, just smoothed the data. What the green is an addition of the blue plus the seasonality. I'll say that again. The green line is an addition of the blue line plus the seasonality. It's the same as the equation that I've showed you. Raw data equals trend plus seasonality plus a residual. It's that. And another word for trend plus seasonality is the model. We're trying to model at least the black line. And what you'll notice are there's some gaps between the model and the raw data. Okay, if I try to find the biggest gap, maybe the biggest gap's here, maybe it's up there, I'm not quite sure, but visually I can actually see, if I trace down, and I put the grid lines in so you can see, if I trace down here, that gap there is that residual there. The residual is the difference between the raw and the model. So hence a big gap, big spike down here. No gap, you're on the 0, 0 line. So there's not much gap between the model and the raw here. Not much gap here. And the biggest gap I can see down here might be in 2012. Or maybe quarter 4 of 2016. Look at that distance there. That's that distance there. And that's a plot of the residuals. The other thing to note about residuals are fine. They're not alarming. They're on every single time series, but they are alarming if they're bigger than 10% of the raw data range. So if I look at the range of raw data, it goes from 2.6 to 4.2. That's 4.2 minus 2.6, 1.6 is the range. Can you do that? 1.6. And if you take 10% of 1.6, you get 0.16. With me so far? So on NZ Grapher, it bolds the 1.6 line. Can you see it from where you're seated? See how there's a bold line through there? So there's a 0.16. There's also a negative 0.16. It's the 10% of the range of the raw data. And when we have residuals that are bigger than 10% of the raw data, there's usually something going on in that particular year. And if we have lots of residuals bigger than 10%, we say the model's rubbish. 1 or 2, probably there's an event that's occurred. 8 or 10 or 12 residuals that are bigger than 10%, wait a minute, this model's not going to work for us. The predictions are rubbish. It's probably like a rainfall time series where there's a lot of range and a lot of unpredictability.